Welcome in to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us. We are going to jump right in because we have a special guest with us for today's edition of the podcast, Action Network's Brett McMurphy, who's been all over a lot of the reporting involving realignment, expansion, SMU, Pac-12, all of those things. And Brett, thanks for the time. I want to jump right in. You were first to report that George Kliavkoff was going to be on SMU's campus last week. Ended up being a very public visit for the Pac-12 commissioner. Take us through that kind of breaking of the news and not necessarily how you heard about it, but how that visit kind of transpired and maybe what you've heard about it that you can share since that moment.
Yeah, well, I was actually, when I heard about it and, I was trying to track it down initially, I was very surprised by it because I was trying to think back of all the, we've had so much realignment going all the way back to Pitt, Syracuse to the ACC, Nebraska leaving the Big 12. I mean, the show would be over if I tried to list them all. We'd be run out of time. But in all those instances, I don't ever remember a commissioner visiting a potential new member before they accepted an invitation. And so that kind of blew me away when I heard that. And I was skeptical at first. And so I, tracked it down. Obviously, it was accurate. Because I've never heard of that happening. And then, I believe you reported, or if it wasn't you, I apologize, but that he was potentially going to be at the basketball game. And that was really weird to me that a commissioner would be seen in public trying to court another school to join their conference. I mean, I guess it's weird times, but, I know Mike Slide never went to Missouri or to Texas A&M before they joined. And I remember, when TCU joined the Big East for, 5 minutes or whatever it was, between their time in the Mountain West and the Big 12, the Big East commissioner had never stepped foot on TCU's campus, except when they had the press conference to announce him as a new member. So it just surprised me. It was unprecedented. And then the more I looked into it, it just shows that the Pac-12, the new media rights deal is going to be, have a significant presence streaming wise. What does that mean exactly? I don't know. But certainly I've been told that the streaming services want to know exactly what their future membership is going to look like before they commit, to whatever deal they may be doing. And then the Pac-12 put out that statement on Monday, which again was kind of weird. Hey, despite everything you've read and heard and seen, everything's fine here. We're working with multiple partners, yada, yada, yada. Why even put that out then? Announce a deal and move on. Don't put out everything's fine, because then everyone automatically says, okay, there's some weird stuff going on here. Why are they doing this?
Yeah, and looking at that statement from yesterday on Monday, that was one of those things where, look, the Pac-12 has been working on this media rights deal for quite some time and in relative silence, and people are still wondering, okay, are they going to get what they want? They doesn't seem like they are, but they are getting maybe a very different media rights deal than really we've seen, involving that media, that streaming side of things. When it comes to that, did you feel like when it came to the instability that people have kind of talked about and the potential of an Oregon-Washington leaving or a Four Corners school, do you feel like they finally said, enough is enough? We need to put something out there. We've done, some public visits with SDSU and SMU now. Things are kind of starting to trend towards that next step of realignment. We have to show we are a united front.
I can speculate on why I think they did it. I think they want to show that there's unity within the conference, that the conference is fine. They're not going anywhere. But I just, I've been doing this for a while. What it does to me is it shows the opposite. Don't tell me how united you are. Don't tell me how together you are. Just announce your media rights deal. And that's all you need to do. So it's kind of like calling your shot. Okay, I'm gonna hit a home run on the next pitch, and then you strike out. And then everybody's like, why don't you just shut up and take your at bat? So I don't know. I don't know who they're listening to. I don't know what the reasoning of that is. It doesn't do any good to the conference. It doesn't. On the flip side, it doesn't harm the conference. It just raises more questions. The Athletic obviously had a huge piece about the struggles of getting the new media rights deal. The thing that really surprised me about that is I've talked to a lot of people who have told me that privately. But they told me that on the condition I wouldn't report any of that, and I kept my word. So the fact that these individuals were willing to be quoted anonymously, knowing the impact it would have on their own conference, kind of surprised me and showed kind of the situation that Pac-12's in right now. And the deal with the streaming services, I mean, look, if you're a Pac-12 fan, you're going to say, hey, this is great. And if you're not, you're going to say, oh, this isn't great. Bottom line is you may get more money for that, which is great. There's not a right or wrong way to do a media rights deal. But the challenge is on those Fridays and Saturdays, on those weekends, when you've got the Big Ten, the Big 12, the SEC, on all these different networks, and the networks and the network shows are promoting these games coming up later tonight, coming up tomorrow, etc. You're not going to get that with the Pac-12 if they're in a streaming service, because Amazon is, you turn on Amazon and the game's on. So you're not going to get that constant drumbeat of promotion for those games. Is that a detriment to a media rights deal? I don't know. It's a preference. How much is that worth? Not to have that constant promotion. How much is that promotion worth? I mean, those are, the beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So we'll just have to see how this plays out. I do know this: Fox is not going to be part of the Pac-12 deal. There's no way. They already have enough inventory with the Big Ten, re-upping with the Big 12. They also have some Mountain West stuff. So basically, the Pac-12 deal is going to be, part of it's going to be ESPN, but they also don't have a great need for a large inventory because they're all in with the SEC and the ACC, and then they have a part of the package with the Big 12. And so it's going to be ESPN plus these streaming services, unless you get some kind of, off-brand, CW or TNT or USA or something like that comes out of nowhere that gets you on linear television. So the money's not going to be more than the ACC, the Big 12, or the ACC or the Big 12. I think it'll be comparable. It may be a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but everything that everyone will focus in on is, is it linear television? Is it streaming? And the good news is if they get this done, then these schools are locked in for X number of years, where they got to pay a hefty buyout to move on.
And with ESPN, that still seems like their position would be Pac-12 After Dark, that 10:30 p.m. Eastern time matchup. Is that kind of what you're hearing on ESPN's end?
Yeah, they don't really have a large need for anything else. I mean, they're gonna show the SEC from sun up to sundown. They've got the ACC deal exclusively. They've got the Big 12, which is mostly the central time zone. BYU's in the mountain. So yeah, they're looking for that last window. And again, keep in mind, the ESPN has no reason to pay the Pac-12 more than they paid the ACC, or more than they paid the Big 12. And I don't think they will. And the reason isn't necessarily that they don't think as highly of the Pac-12 as they do these other leagues. The main reason is they're competing with nobody. Fox isn't going to do it. It looks like CBS wouldn't be involved. NBC's not going to do it. So there's no reason for ESPN to overpay. And the same kind of with the streaming services. Everybody thought the streaming services would be this pot of gold. Well, why would the streaming service feel the need to overpay for something if they're really not competing with anyone else? I mean, I guess if you get down to, the streaming services wants the top 3 picks from the Pac-12, then they're going to have to pay more. Well, if you do that, then if ESPN's not getting the top pick or they're getting the third pick or however it's broken down, then that obviously impacts the value of their deal too. So, I mean, we'll find out soon enough what's going to happen. But the thing is with the Pac-12, and I'll be upfront. I've said this before on other interviews. I'm an Oklahoma State grad, so I'm obviously have ties. I'm an alum of a Big 12 school. I just think the Big 12 is in a better position, not because they're better, but actually because nobody wants any of the Big 12 schools. OU and Texas are gone. So the Big 10 doesn't have any desire to take any Big 12 schools. The SEC got who they wanted. The ACC doesn't want any. So because of that, in a weird way, the Big 12, I think, has more security because the future of the Pac-12 is not dependent on the Big 12 media rights deals. It's dependent on, does the Big 10 add any more schools? Because if they do, they're going to come from the Pac-12. And then if they grab more schools from the Pac-12, how does that impact the remaining Pac-12 schools? Do some of those try to go to the Big 12? Do they stay where they're at? Does the Pac-12 feel like they're secure enough by simply adding San Diego State and SMU? Or do they try to go after UNLV and Fresno State? That's kind of the uncertainty with the Pac-12 is their future is dependent on what the Big 10 does. And because the Big 12, again, does not have any schools that any other leagues want, they are kind of have more security in a weird way.
You mentioned we'll find out soon enough, and I feel like everybody's been waiting for a long time on the Pac-12. Do you see things moving quickly, and what kind of does quickly look like on the media rights front with that group, and how does it tie into expansion for the Pac-12?
Well, I would guess I would think if you're going to put out that statement that you would be announcing something in the next week or two, but from what I've heard, what The Athletic reported, it seems like it could be, we could get into late March, maybe April. So is that quickly? I'm not sure if it is or not. I just think the longer it goes on, the more uncertainty there is. But if you're the Pac-12, there's no reason to sign something tomorrow if you feel like by waiting a week or 2 months or 3 months, you can get a better deal some way. So that's kind of the predicament they're in. Do they take what they have now, or do they try to, squeeze some more blood out of a turnip and try to get more money and then do a deal in 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 months? I mean, ultimately, no one's going to care, 2 or 3 years from now, whether they got the deal done on February 14th or April 14th. It's kind of like hiring a football coach. Do you really care if you hired your coach at the end of your new coach at the end of the season, or you hired him a week before the season started? All you care about is the results on the field. And so I think that's kind of similar to what the Pac-12 is doing. They just want to get the best deal they can. Obviously, the sooner the better. But I think they'll wait as long as they need to get as much as they can.
Probably about solid 7 years ago, I think now, the Big 12 went through their exercise of doing pretty public interviews around expansion, and they ended up standing pat and not doing anything then. Now they added, of course, BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and Houston. I think I said that. UCF. Thank you. SMU was in on those interviews at that time. Since then, what have you seen from SMU as far as realignment and their efforts to get in on the Power 5 level? What do you see from a national side as far as what SMU would now bring?
Well, real quickly, revisiting that history of the Big 12, I don't know why the Big 12
lost you there.
Did all that would add any value schools that they were looking at, it would make the value of their media rights deal worth less per school. So I still don't understand why they went through that whole thing. That was something, the presidents and Bob Bowlesby wanted to do. So if you're SMU, I wouldn't feel slighted. I didn't understand why they did that anyway. currently now, I think why SMU has become attractive, specifically the Pac-12, is obviously, the success you guys have had the past 3 or 4 years in football. I mean, that's the big thing. People can talk about basketball, but football is what means the most. So the fact that SMU has had some solid seasons in the last 3 or 4 years certainly helps. If SMU was coming off, 3 consecutive 3-win seasons, I don't believe you guys are in this conversation. That's 1A. 1B is you're in the state of Texas. And I think that's huge for the Pac-12 going forward. And because I know that I've talked to, Bo Pelini, the former coach of Nebraska, about this, and he thought one of the biggest detriments to Nebraska was when they joined the Big Ten and got out of the Big 12, specifically because they weren't playing in the state of Texas anymore. They were recruiting in the state. They could go into households and tell their parents, hey, we're going to come down here and we're going to play 2 or 3 times a year so you can come see your son play. And then suddenly they can't come down to Texas anymore because they're not playing games in the state. You can't recruit the state of Texas. I don't have to tell you what the state of Texas is like recruiting wise. And so I think that's huge for the Pac-12 and for the California schools to be able to come into Texas. So I think that's the biggest reasons SMU has been attractive for the Pac-12 is to get into the Texas market. And I think because of that, I think that's why the Big 12 didn't look at SMU as strongly, because they felt the need to get in Houston and, with Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, etc. They've already got a lot of Texas schools, so it really wouldn't help them to add any more Texas schools. I don't really think it was a slight on SMU. It was more like, we've got enough in Texas, so we need to look to some of these other markets like BYU, Cincinnati, UCF. And the SEC kind of, for a while, had a similar deal where if they had a school in a state and they were looking to add a new member, they would not consider a school in a state that already had an existing member. Like Florida, they wouldn't look at Florida State because they had Florida. Same with South Carolina. They've got a school there. So, obviously that has changed now with adding Texas, with where Texas A&M already is. But I think that's kind of why the Big 12 didn't look as hard as SMU, but it's certainly why SMU is a very, very attractive potential. And I don't think it's a matter of if, I just think it's a matter of when the Pac-12 extends the official invite to SMU and San Diego State at this point.
What does the long-term outlook for SMU look like once they do get to a Power 5 level? Do you see what a lot of people around the program at least see, which is, okay, they finally have that patch on their chest. They can go into some of these recruits' homes and sell a Power 5 conference. They can sell whatever that media rights deal looks like. They can sell some of the advantages finally and kind of continue to grow and progress.
Oh, absolutely. And no matter what the media rights deal is going to be, it's still going to be better than what they're getting in the American. The same with Cincinnati and Houston. They're getting better in the Big 12 what they got in the American. BYU is getting better what they got as an independent as part of the Big 12. And now that you're in the Power 5, your resources, you're going to have more resources. You're going to play, more games and better, we would think, in better television windows. You're going to get noticed more. I hate to bring up this 3-letter word again, but, you look at TCU and the difference it's made for them, being the fact from them being in the Mountain West to being in the Big 12, and just the difference that it's made. That's huge. It can transform your program almost overnight. There's no reason that can't happen to SMU. And it's unfair that, there's this, the difference between the Power 5 and the Group of 5, but it's very real. And if you're not in a Power 5 league going forward in the next couple of years, and I've told this to friends of mine that are at Group of 5 schools, you're obsolete. You really are. And that sucks, but that's the reality, because the way that the college athletics is going and has been going, the difference in the revenue between the Power Five and the Group of Five. The access for the college football playoff is different. Everything is so much different, and it literally is the have and the have-not. So for SMU to get in that club, if you will, before they close the doors forever, that's great. And then once you're in there and SMU can win and take advantage of that, then who knows what's going to happen 5 years down the road. Then maybe at that point, the Big 12 goes to 16 or they lose schools somewhere. And then, then you can move to another Power Five league. But certainly it's better than not being in a Power Five league. I can tell you that. And then from that point, it's, can you take advantage? Can you have the success that TCU has had? Can you look at Utah going from the Mountain West to the Pac-12? They played in a couple of Rose Bowls. Imagine thinking that, 10 years or so ago. And so, yeah, once you're in the club, I guess, now, the sky's the limit, and you're on equal footing with some of these other guys that you really weren't on equal footing with in a Group of Five conference.
And we'll get you out of here on this one, a quick one. And I guess this wouldn't be a surprise if it happened, but do you see any surprise major moves being done behind the scenes? Or is everyone else just kind of standing pat and kind of watching that Big Ten potential with Oregon and Washington, or is there a blockbuster deal behind the scenes?
No, I don't think so. I think the biggest thing is, some people think the Big Ten is done expanding because Kevin Warren's moving on to the NFL in April. I still think the Big Ten wants to do something. I don't think they brought on USC and UCLA to have them stranded out there. I think they want to give them a couple of travel partners. I think in the best scenario for the Big Ten, they would want to have that happen for the 2024 season. That would mean something would have to move quickly if that would happen. But if you see the 10 remaining Pac-12 schools sign a grant of rights deal, then that would probably, for all intents and purposes, shut down the Oregon, Washington of the Big Ten movement, at least in the next couple of years. So I think that's really the big moves we could see. The only other thing we could see, and I think this is probably several years down the road, is, the ACC has 10 or 12 years left on their media rights deal. There are a lot of schools within that conference that would love to get out. If any of them can figure out a way to climb over the wall and get out of that media rights deal, then I think you're going to see chaos, because then you're going to see those elite teams in the ACC, the Florida States, Miami, Clemson's, North Carolina, Virginia, those schools, they will be sought after by the Big Ten and the SEC. And I think those two leagues jump up to 20. And so then when that happens, who knows what everything will look like. But I think that's several years down the road. But I think that will happen. Again, I don't think it's an if, I think it's a when. But because of the length of the ACC deal, I think that's several years away. But again, for SMU, if that happens or not, as long as you're in a Power Five league, you're in a good position, because then you can, shuffle the deck and end up in another different league, or maybe your league grows or merges with another power league. But again, it's better to be in that group than not being in it, because I'm afraid that we'll see a split between the Power Five and the non-Power Fives in the somewhat near future. And if you're not in the non-Power Fives, I don't see how you can compete 365 days a year because of the difference in the revenue and resources and all those things.
Great insight, Brett McMurphy. Thanks so much. Conference realignment never ends. You gave a hint to that one down the line. We appreciate all the time you gave, and thanks so much for stopping by.
You got it. Thanks, Billy. I appreciate it.
Have a good one, Brett McMurphy. There he is. Appreciate Brett for stopping in on the Pony Express podcast. We've got more to cover and just a little bit of reaction to what Brett said and kind of the latest. We talked about during that segment with Brett, the Pac-12 league announcing their statement of unity and that we are in this together to get a media rights deal done. And they look forward to announcing that in the near future. And if you followed a lot of what was reported on Monday, it circled around, okay, the Pac-12 announces this statement. Interesting timing, and Brett alluded to that as well. what does that mean? What does that look like? Are we looking at a situation where the media rights deal is on the table, ready for everyone to approve, along with the expansion of the conference? Or is there still time to go on this? Is there still negotiating to be done? But it's now reached a point where they feel good enough about it to release that statement and to address, just call it how it is, the rumors around the league's future. Instead, they wanted to go ahead and release that statement. Now, the Big 12 released a similar statement last year before announcing their additions to the conference. That is going to be kind of where we wait and see. What does the end result of the Pac-12's media rights negotiations and expansion look like? You heard Brett allude to it. It's what we've reported behind the scenes. San Diego State, SMU look like shoo-ins to join the Pac-12. A matter of when, not if at this point, which is what we believe and what our sources are telling us. George Kliavkoff's public visit, I think, really cemented that for a lot of people. But this is realignment. The unexpected can happen. It doesn't seem like there's going to be some massive blockbuster move at this point that wouldn't have already been, let's say, speculated on. And, with how public these, especially between the Big 12 and the Pac-12, how public this reporting has been on their expansion goals and what their futures look like, it doesn't seem like we're in for a big surprise coming from college football realignment, but we'll be, of course, keeping an eye on that to see if that happens. As far as SMU, sources continue to remain optimistic. I mean, this is a situation that SMU has been working towards for quite some time now. They've had closed door meetings for many, many months now, dating back over a year with the Pac-12, Big 12, ACC. It's now centered around the Pac-12, and more so a when, not if, SMU does get that invitation. And I think, just speculating here, that was why the visit with George Kliavkoff ended up just being so public. These are two sides that have been around each other a good bit and had plenty of discussion. So there's a comfort level there. There's a comfort level to go to a campus and be in the public eye like George Kliavkoff and other Pac-12 officials were, which stands out to me as far as why they ended up going through with it, even after Brett broke it. And then we added the reporting on George Kliavkoff going to the SMU Temple game last week. That was something that we kind of sat back and said, all right, if this doesn't happen now, if he's not there, well, where is he? And what impact does that have? But nope, he was on SMU's campus for a full day of meetings, tours. SMU rolled out the red carpet. And that's all I can really say. Just, as far as my public reporting on it, if you're an ontheponyexpress.com subscriber, we're dropping a kind of state of the Pac-12 and SMU piece on Tuesday. As we're recording this, we'll drop that shortly after and kind of share some more about just kind of how SMU was able to really kind of flex its muscles a little bit and make George Kliavkoff really be impressed. Because shortly after that visit, you see multiple reports that he does have the approval of the league to expand, and all signs point to San Diego State and SMU. That also involves, of course, the pending media rights deal getting done and what that looks like and how the partners, factor in their own feedback with the league and kind of where they stand and who they would expand with. So we're in a holding period. We continue to be in that. There's been reporting that, this can move quickly, and some people are saying a week. You heard Brett, it could be April. I'm more in the 2 to 3 week kind of stance, but that is more speculation based on what I've heard from sources. A lot of people expected it to be kind of a coronation and George Kliavkoff visits SMU, and by the end of the week, there's an announcement. Not the case. These things are complicated, and Brett shed some light on the media rights deal negotiations and picking time slots and how that impacts money overall, how the Pac-12 is going to get the most out of this deal. Is really the goal for George Kliavkoff. The Pac-12 has been in kind of a little bit of a hell with media rights from time to time, with the failure of the Pac-12 network. Obviously, their time slots, they've been branded as Pac-12 After Dark for a long time. So how can they capitalize on that money-wise and exposure-wise while obviously having to be creative with this streaming services that are in discussions with the Pac-12. It's going to be very interesting to see how all that shakes out, but we'll have you covered on that front at ontheponyexpress.com. We appreciate you guys listening to this podcast. Please hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel. Player and coach interviews. We've got the podcast up there. Once recruits get going again, we'll have them back up and rolling. We're in a dead period right now, but camps are supposed to start back up. We crossed over that 500 mark. We're well on our way to 600 now. Keep growing the channel for us. We appreciate it. We'll also have you covered Thursday night as SMU welcomes number 2 Houston to Moody Coliseum, 6 o'clock Central matchup for the Mustangs in Moody on ESPN2. Tough overtime loss for SMU basketball at Wichita State. They kind of, just kind of let that one get away from them. They were up with a minute to go and just weren't able to close. And that's kind of been the history of this team this season. Free throws are a huge, huge part of why this team is record-wise so bad currently. SMU is kind of at a rock bottom position. They are not at the 10-win mark yet. They welcome Houston that walked all over them down in Houston earlier this year. Now they've kind of strung together a little bit of better play as of late, and this will be a very interesting matchup. They played on Sunday. They were back early. They have multiple days off until this Thursday game now. We'll see what Rob Lanier and his staff can bring to the table in that matchup. We'll be there to cover it in Moody Coliseum. Zurich Phelps was named to the AAC honor roll this week for his performance over the last week or so. So he is trending up. He's played very well. I think when you look at this team and what you need to fix, it's hard. I mentioned this in our mailbag for our subscribers on the site, but a lot of what you are looking for in terms of fixes for SMU basketball right now is not during the season. This team plays hard. I really don't think many people can argue against that. They are out of sorts at times offensively, but they've also played a little bit better in the last month offensively. Defensively, they don't have the guys that can really get you stops when you really, really need it. We've seen that at moments. We saw that they were up 19-2. They couldn't close the door against Temple and allowed them back into the game by the end of the first half. And we've seen that throughout a lot of their games this year as they just couldn't get stops. It just looks out of sorts. But one thing you can get in the offseason that would really kind of solidify and calm the waters would be a true point guard. And Rob Lanier mentioned that this summer, that they wished they would have gotten a true point guard, somebody that can really go. And he thought that was going to be a little bit of a Achilles heel for this team going into this season. And sure enough, it has been. Zurich Phelps has been pretty good, in my opinion, shouldering a lot of that load. But if you can bring in a true point guard that plays off the ball with him, you're looking at a situation where you're in a much better spot offensively. And then they're going to have to address just this roster overall. It's just not good enough. Obviously, this league will change, but we've seen this league be very different this year. Temple was a top 3 team when SMU beat them earlier this year. Obviously, Houston is the class of the conference, but you're also going to see multiple teams leave this league, and it's going to be very different next year. So how does this team look in the new AAC? That's going to be a telltale sign. They have the resources. They have got to go out and get some players that can bring them back to the level that is expected of SMU basketball. And they got to work on free throws in the offseason. I'll say that. They've really let some games go that they could have won just at the free throw line. So we will be watching Houston, SMU, Thursday night, 6 p.m. Central on ESPN2. Wednesday, Rhett Lashley and his staff will finally get together. Shout out to the Ice Storm for ruining this on National Signing Day. But we will have our meet and greet with the 2023 class with the coaching staff breaking them down on SMU campus with the media and others invited to the Miller Event Center for lunch around noon. So we will have coverage of that. Finally get to hear from Rhett Lashley himself about this 2023 signing class and kind of what they bring to the table. It should be a fun event. Hopefully we'll see some of our subscribers there. Please subscribe to ontheponyexpress.com. $10 for a month. Just a couple cups of coffee a month, really, to get you the latest on SMU realignment, recruiting, team news. If you subscribe today, you'll get the first week of spring ball covered. So you can kind of get a taste of our coverage on that front. please go ahead, pick up a subscription to the site, and we will have all that covered for you. A lot of spring football preview content to come over the next couple weeks as well. So appreciate you guys listening to this edition. Thanks to Brett McMurphy for stopping by to shed some light on realignment. And we will catch up with you guys later this week for another spring preview position podcast, and also to talk more about what Rhett Lashley had to say and his staff about the 2023 recruiting class on Thursday. So appreciate all you guys who subscribe to On the Pony Express's YouTube channel. Please hit that subscribe button to our YouTube channel and help it grow even more. Hope you guys have a great week, and we will catch you guys later this week. Thanks for listening.